Hey everybody, dead air. It's what happens when Jason hosts because Jason doesn't have all the passwords. We're going to work on that. Welcome to episode number 416 of Cincinnati Soccer Talk. I am your very hot host, Jason Ashcraft. It is burning up in this room, by the way. A very warm day outside, and we are joined by a great cast of characters. Joining us for just the second time ever, but the first time that I think she and I have been on the podcast together is our good friend Christy. Christy, welcome back.
Hello, it's good to be here.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this Monday evening. Of course, you know the guy up here to my top right, Jose. Jose, you were not at the match this weekend,
Nope,
but I know you watched it on TV. I understand
indeed.
you dozed off before the match.
I did. I was under the weather, still am actually. And by the time I was feeling more or less human, it's like, oh my God, it's 15 minutes. Turn on the TV.
Well, we're glad that you're out and about today. Hopefully, you're feeling all better because I had
A
texted
little
you about
better.
a
Thank
ticket.
you.
You were like, "Oh, wait, I dozed off," but it was not a problem. Another fellow who was at the game with me on Saturday, who did get to see what will undoubtedly go down as FC Cincinnati's goal of the year by Kevin Denkey, is Coach Goff. Coach, welcome back.
Yeah, really happy to be here. It's probably the best goal I've seen live. I've seen a lot of great ones on TV, but it's got to be at least tied for tops that I've seen live. There were some teenage soccer players that were walking up the steps like right in front of me while it was happening, but I stood up and got around them, and then I was so happy that it happened, and they were like, "What happened?" I'm like, "Well, if you were sitting and watching the game instead of walking up and down the steps, you might have seen."
See, typically what happens is when I get up to either get a concession stand visit or a restroom visit, that's when FC Cincinnati scores. So I was lucky to see both goals this time around. Folks, I already mentioned it was a little warm in here in my house, but Apollo Home has you covered as we head into the summer months. FC Cincinnati is on a hot streak, but that doesn't mean that you need to be as warm as I am. The spring temperatures rise. Keep your house cool with a $29 HVAC cooling tune-up from Apollo Home. Also, just for CST listeners, Apollo Home is offering a $1,001 off of a new AC unit. That's right, $1,100 off. That's a heck of a coupon. No other podcast is going to offer you that large of a discount on anything. So CST has just got that gift for you with our great partners at Apollo Home. Give them a call, send them a text, or schedule online at apollohome.com. Big shout out, big thanks to Apollo Home for all of their support. Fellas, ladies, it is time for best and worst of the week. And Christy, since you are joining us for the first time in what seems like forever, what was your best?
All right, my best was Kevin Denkey's positioning in the final third. I think the first goal doesn't happen if he's not in place for that rebound, especially while staying on sides. That's been an issue with a lot of our attackers in the past. So that positioning is huge. And then the second piece is just a masterpiece in the box, coming in from that ball from Luca, being in the position, watching the field and knowing exactly how to finish there. You know, he could have probably pivoted and gone for a header, but being able to execute the bicycle kick and that final third is huge. So that is my best.
And what about your worst?
My worst is giving the other team way too much time with the ball in the second half. I don't know how we managed to go from 60% possession in the first half to only 48 in the second. I feel like all of a sudden we turned around and it was like they had shot on shot on shot on us. And that just was not happening as much in the first half. And then to ultimately give up that goal at the end, it's just unnecessary. It needs to be rectified for when we play better teams, because when we play teams like Columbus or Austin or Dallas coming up, I think that's going to be a huge problem.
Absolutely. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about both of those things as we dive in to the episode. Coach, lay it on me. What is your best and worst?
My best is one Obi Wobodo, not only because it was so great to see him back out there and with the team, but his introduction actually made a real difference too. You know, in stark contrast to some of his midfield counterparts, 15 of his 21 passes were in the forward direction. Now, I know I'm the coach here, so I'm going to explain this to you. Passing the ball towards the other team's goal, guys, is a good thing. So I'm sorry to go high level there on you, but Obi understands it. So that was good. And he had 3 progressive passes, which means 3 of those 15 were actually like through the lines or of distance to move the ball forward in a way that it was meaningful and statistically relevant. My worst is Evander and Kevin Denkey doing kind of what I thought was their best Lucho Acosta, Aaron Bupenza impression. And not in how they played, but man, those two were bickering and yelling at each other a couple times. There were a couple times that Kevin Denkey elected to shoot that Evander did full on throwing his hands down and was showing a lot of frustration out there. So hopefully it was just a game where, because of the tight lines of Kansas City, which we'll talk about later, they were both getting a little frustrated and both wanted more touches, and that comes out in competitors. That's what I'm going to go with for now, but at least in this match, man, they were not getting along.
Seems like there was a little bit of tension. I noticed that too. Jose, lay it on us. What is your best and worst?
Well, I think it's already been said a little bit. It's the sequence that led to that first goal. I mean, 4 different players touched on it. We'll go into a little bit more detail later, but I really like the way that 4 different players touched it before. 4, and then of course KD scores. I got to mention Engel, though. He had a really good game. I still think his crosses are something to be desired, but he had a good game. And of course, that shot from him for the first goal was important. I mean, it gave it over to KD, who then scored it. My worst is, and Christy already mentioned it, we keep letting teams hang on. And we'll talk more about this later. So those best and worst.
Excellent points. We got some great ones here in the chat. David Moore, best, another W. Worst, Luka trying to take on the entire back line by himself. We showed Rupesh a second ago. His best was diagonal passing to the opposite wing back. The worst, the club still getting bogged down in the final third. We're kind of repeating some stuff that we mentioned a minute ago. And Kevin Michael, best, 4-0 in April. I'll take that any day. Kevin, and worst, he doesn't have one. Champagne problems, folks. I think that is the theme for this episode, is champagne problems. My best of the week has nothing to do with anything that happened with the team. It was Kids Day, which meant that the kids were the focus for all the pregame stuff. So big ups to George, the local spelling bee champion, who got to pull the sword. He did a great job. I can't remember her name, the girl who sang the national anthem, absolutely destroyed it in a good way. So good. And then our mini PA announcer, our kid who was on the PA, just great. I mentioned in another online space that they should just make that the normal national anthem singer and the normal PA. Just let those kids do it. But that was my best. I guess my worst, for me, my worst was, again, I'm kind of going to repeat what's already been said. We did let this team hang around with us. We're going to talk a little bit more about it later, but kind of a underwhelming win, maybe, in a sense, despite all of the great stuff that happened on the pitch. Speaking of on the pitch, let's start off our recap with the starting lineup. Obviously, Roman Celentano in the goal between the pipes. Your back line of the center backs, Nick Haglund, Miles Robinson, and Matt Miazga. Out on the wing backs was DeAndre Yedlin, Lucas Engel. Your midfield was Pavel Buka, Anunga, and Evander, and playing up top was Luca Orishano, and of course Kevin Denkey. So a kind of a Luca moving into sort of a striker position, a little bit more free range. But I'm going to kind of sneak ahead a little bit. As we look at this lineup, I did notice that it seemed to open up a little bit when, Yedlin was taken out of the match and Luke, or not taken out, but slid back into the center back position. Luka was allowed to move out, which brings me to, I think, our first point. Any of you can take this, but is this maybe a slight indictment on DeAndre Yedlin at the wingback position? Would he be better served maybe as a center back, or should we maybe try putting Luka back there as we move forward? I know, again, champagne problems, but
I got pretty strong thoughts on this, so I'll jump straight away in, and then we'll get Jose and Christy's thoughts. But I've thought for a long time that the way that this team is structured, they rely on their wingbacks for a lot of chance creation. At least that's the ideal, right? They push them up higher, oftentimes dropping players like Evander or Orshano in behind them to then advance the ball, which means they are going to be on the ball in the final third. And DeAndre Yedlin has never in his career been an offensive threat there. His crosses aren't good. And he doesn't take players on like he used to when he was younger. So he is most of the time stepping on the ball and pulling it back, which is useful for a team who just wants to recycle possession over and over, but not useful for a team who really wants those wide players to be dangerous. Now, Lucas Engel really hasn't been that much better on the other side, but we've seen when a player like Lucas Engel gets forward and actually has something to do with the ball, how it can help. And we'll talk about that in a minute, right? But the problem that I have is I'm not sure that Luca Orshano is the answer either, because he is so, let's say, disinterested defensively. So I don't know. Jose, Christy, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree with it. I mean, I don't have much to add other than I think Yedlin is a good defensive back, but he really doesn't add much to the offense, to the attack. And that right wing, we talked a lot in the beginning of the season about how the left wing is a problem. Well, the right wing is also a problem in terms of chance creation. As a defensive back, yes, he's very good. But if we are going to continue building from the back, then certainly Yedlin is not the answer. Now, Powell played really good, but he only played a few minutes compared to Yedlin. And I'm still convinced that Powell does not have the stamina at the last 90 minutes for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Yedlin, I think he has really good communication with the back line. I think he's a really strong leader in the back line. I don't think he has the forward field vision that a player like Luka does. And now Luka, I think, has that because he is so kind of disinterested in the defensive side. But being able to look at the field and see what's happening and kind of create opportunities from the midfield and coming from the back, I think that's what Yedlin doesn't necessarily excel at. I think he's a lot stronger in that back line, in that center position. I don't know that putting Luka back there would help either. So I don't know that taking Yedlin out is the right choice at that position, but I definitely think it's something to be talked about when it comes to a tactical standpoint.
Yeah, great points. Rupesh brought this up, that maybe it's an indictment on Luka trying to dribble too much going forward. I don't know if it's that, but that does bring up an interesting point, though. And I know, again, champagne problems. We just won every game in the month of April. But I think we brought this up several weeks ago about maybe the answer putting Luka at a true wing position, but does that solve the possible issue with Yedlin? Again, I will come out and say that I'm usually the idiot when it comes to tactics, but is this maybe a situation where you don't want to ask DeAndre to get forward and maybe you just kind of keep Luka out there?
Yeah, I think that is one way to solve it. You could literally play a four at the back with two center backs and have DeAndre Yedlin play a right outside back and just have him tuck in defensively and not really go forward very much. Now, of course, that would pull a guy like Nick Hagland or out of the lineup, and he's been playing really well. So I don't know what you want to do with that. You could also play exactly how you are, but continue to really push a guy like Luca Orshano out to the wing in possession, and then have a guy like DeAndre Yedlin tuck more in like a defensive midfielder to kind of be there to help recycle the ball. He likes to do that anyway. Pick up the ball, move it on to Pavel Buka, move it on to the other side, and then let a guy like Anunga sit even deeper to more just break up play and not be part of that attack. I think right now FCC is suffering from this idea that the right wing back plays the way the right wing back plays, whether it's Powell, whether it's Orshano, whether it's Yedlin, the tactic doesn't change. And I think there's just real limitations with that. Now I say problem or limitations. And like you said, Jason, we just won all the matches in April. So maybe it's not as big of a problem, but it is limiting how well this offense attacks, I think.
I wonder too, because we've been missing Obi Wobodo for quite a while, and Brian Anunga, good player, very good player. We've talked about his limitations passing forward. Do you think, Jose, that if we are able to get Obi back to full strength and in the lineup on a regular basis, that maybe that's going to open some things up in the midfield, and maybe we're not relying on Yedlin as much?
Okay, the short answer is no, I don't think so. because of the limitations that Yedlin has in terms of progression and creating opportunities. I think the back line is going to feel a lot more confident. And I think, psychologically, that's important too. Is okay, we got Obi back. We trust Anunga, but Obi is the guy here who has been anchoring this midfield for a while. So I think that might give more confidence in the backfield to allow Yedlin to move forward a little bit. But I still think there's a problem on the right wing if we continue to play with these 3 center backs and 2 wing backs. Now, as coach said, and I'm not going to contradict him because I think he's right. If we go to a back 4, well, then maybe changes a little bit the tactics. So again, short answer, but then a long explanation. I don't think it changes a lot as long as we're depending on Yedlin creating opportunities up front, because that's just not going to happen.
True. And I don't think it changes a lot if we keep winning. So I think we're all but hey, we're doing a podcast. What's the point of a podcast?
We'll get to that. We'll get to these 1-goal wins later.
Yeah, exactly. We would be remiss though if we did not talk about the star of the evening, Kevin Denkey. He just had a stellar game. Guys, and the thing that I noticed, 3 touches in the box. 2 of those ended in a goal. Imagine if he was getting 6 touches. I'm not even asking for a double digits here. 6 touches in the box. Yeah. The first goal obviously was a poacher's goal coming up off of a counterattack. Great play by Lucas Engel in that as well. As we saw the build up to that goal. Coach, what about that impressed you?
Yeah, I think that the first thing I would say is obviously FC Cincinnati did a really good job winning the ball back on the counter press to set up that moment. It was Vander who ended up with the ball at the edge of the attacking third after he I think him and Orshano worked together to win the ball back. But from there, when Vander picks up the ball, instead of just sitting or asking for a square ball, Buka made a good hard run straight up the middle. And when he didn't get the ball right away, he turned and showed like he was a center forward. And that allowed Evander to find him with the pass. And then from there, obviously, he kind of guided the ball towards Engel. And then because they were playing from one side to the other in that, when Engel shot, Kevin Denkey was completely on the blind side of the defense, which allowed him to just ghost in there and then a really nice finish.
Christy, Kevin Denkey was brought on to be a true number 9. I mean, this is the kind of goal that you expect someone of his caliber to score on a regular basis.
Yes. Absolutely. I think I think a big piece of it, like I said earlier, is just his positioning, knowing, looking across the field and anticipating what Engel is going to do. And then the fact that it might come off the goalie and being able to slide in there without making it too obvious, without becoming, sitting up there in an offsides position. I think just being able to read that, and not only that, take the opportunity and finish. I think we've had a lot of players who can get up there and they can make that touch, but it doesn't go in the goal, or it goes straight back to the goalie, or it goes completely wide, or it goes into the stands. I think being able to make those accurate finishes is a big difference that Denkey has brought in his play.
FC Cincinnati with 15 total shots to SKC with 11. Several other really good chances out there in the match, but we mentioned Lucas Engel, and it's not in the rundown, but I do kind of want to give him his props before we move forward. In the past few weeks, I was a little critical of him earlier in the season because I didn't think his passing was quite there. I will say myself, in the past few weeks, I've become a big Lucas Engel fanboy. I think the guy has really stepped up. His passing looks a lot sharper. And Jose, he had a few really good looks at goal. I mean, he did. Yeah, he was making a bigger scoring threat than his partner on the other side of
which
the
is why I
pitch.
said, hey, honorable mention to him because he played a really good game.
Yeah, absolutely. Rupesh, thank you for that stat. Still only 0.8 xG for the club in the match. One thing that did not have a high xG, but it went in anyway, was what is probably going to wind up being the goal of the year, obviously, for FC Cincinnati. Kevin Denkey with the absolutely the best goal that I have seen in person, and I have been to a lot of soccer matches in my day. In the 78th minute, Luca Orishano feeds him a lob, and he hits it with one of the best bicycle kicks you'll ever see. Jose, what were your first thoughts when you saw that go in?
Well, first of all, this just really happened because you don't see goals like this very often. Yes, we've seen the big bangers from Orellana and Acosta when it was here. Yes, but this was one thing that the cross goes in. I think, okay, it's going to be headed out, and when he does that bicycle kick, okay, this is you can see this in any. You don't see this even in some of the best leagues in the world. This was a world-class goal. But I also want to mention, the cross from Orellano, who came also from a pass from Obi. I mean, Obi sends this to Orellano, then he does a dribble and he crosses into the box. We have perfect cross. And then Denkey does the rest. I mean, this was just a world-class goal.
It was a nice build-up off of like a reset after a corner.
Yes.
Christy, the thing I noticed when I watched that lob go up, I thought he was looking for Evander. And then, to see Denkey hit the shot. I mean, what were your thoughts? I think he was actually looking for Evander, and Kevin was there to make a spectacular play.
Yeah, I think he was looking for someone to take the ball off their head. I want to say Robinson was up in there too, maybe. I think he was slotting it in for someone a little on the taller side to knock it in with their head. And I think Denkey just I don't know if it was intentional or not to be in the perfect positioning for a bicycle kick, but man, was he. And man, did he execute that well, because that's an impossible goal to score there for most people. So to be able to do that, and honestly, I think if Denkey had pivoted a little bit, he probably could have even taken it on his head as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, just to be able to do it with that style and that positioning is huge.
Yeah, exactly. Coach, this would be one for the training ground. This is why you reset after a corner kick, right?
Yeah. We saw Luke Orishano keep himself onside, which we've talked about a couple of times, how important a little thing like that is. There was a play earlier in the game, just because we've been, picking on DeAndre Yedlin this whole time, where Yedlin was just standing offside. They passed the ball to him, like, offside. Well, you're looking across the whole line. There's no reason to be offside there. Orishano got himself back onside. Then when he received the ball, the defender showed him onto his left. But he wasn't in a great position because everybody was already forward into the box because it was a corner to cross the ball from there. So he actually beat the defender to the right to get deeper, then came back to his left to cross that. And so, I was pretty impressed. We had this comment about Orishano dribbling too much. He completed 5 of his 7 dribbles. And in a game when nobody else is being dangerous, I'd say, kid, if you're going to complete 5 of 7, dribble, go at him every time. If you're going to complete 4 of 7, 3.5 of 7. If you're 50%, you're doing well there. So I was pretty impressed with that whole play. Other than up until he biked to the goal in, Denkey looked so like he was just kind of standing, like, what's going to happen? He wasn't moving, not checking to the ball. Then the ball went up, and he's like, oh, yeah, I could probably do this. And then he did. It didn't look like he was even it didn't look like he saw the ball. It was like almost he was pretending that he didn't know where it was. And then he just, overhead kicks. And I got to be honest, I lost my mind a little bit. I was, doing that thing where you're like snapping your fingers and like holding your head, the whole 9 yards.
I was doing the same thing. I was filming for my YouTube channel, a game day vlog, and I missed the goal, but I got the celebration. Everybody around me, it was like a second or two for them to process what just happened. And I was there last year for not the second Luka 70-yard goal, but that one that he hit, I think, against Philly, that was like 50. It was incredible goal. It was kind of the similar thing. Like you see this awesome play, and Denkey didn't even look like he jumped that hard. Like he just floated over and it went in. And everybody, I think, kind of thought, oh, wait a minute, that actually went in. absolute masterclass on that by Kevin Denkey. I do want to bring this up though, because we do have time to kind of talk about this a little bit. I mentioned 3 touches in the box, and this has kind of been Jose. You mentioned this before. We'll just talk about it now because these 1-goal wins that FC Cincinnati gets, not really sustainable. What can we do to make sure that guys are getting more touches in the box? I mean, I know that for me, it's a very frustrating thing to say.
Well, I mean, we've talked about this too. Obviously, the crosses are not effective right now. Now, I don't know whether that's because even though Luka is getting better, and obviously, Yedel is just not that kind of guy. So there aren't enough. I don't think there's enough play on the wings yet. We saw a little bit of that this time, but it always seems to go through the right where Orellano is, because, well, that's Orellano, right? Not much happens usually on the left side. So I think, first of all, there has to be more balance between the two, because teams, I'm sure, are catching on. Okay, yeah, they're going to play through the right because we got Orellano there. So, if we start boxing him in, they'll be less effective. So we're going to start spreading that out. Also, and I think, Coach, you might have mentioned this too, they got to take more risks. Sometimes they just seem to be too cautious. It's like, well, let's wait. Well, by the time you wait, the lines are already set up. We don't move fast. And maybe that's Noonan's tactics, to move slow. Sometimes you hear him say, yeah, we had to slow down the game. Okay, but when you need to move fast, maybe you should move faster. I mean, do we have the personnel to do that? On the right side with Orellano, yes. But again, if we're building up from the back, well, with Yedlin, we talked about it, probably not. Engel is getting better. Maybe there's a possibility of spreading the game out more out to the left side. So I think those are several things that need to happen. And again, chemistry between the big 3.
The second half, it really was a tale of 2 halves in this match. And I think that's why I kind of labeled this as it's a good win, but in a sense, I left the game excited and happy, but a little miffed because Sporting Kansas City is not a good team. They came off a win, but they were a team that I think everybody looking at the record would have expected FC Cincinnati to really put the screws to them, to really put this game away.
And the back line was missing some players.
Exactly. And Christy, you mentioned this. I'm glad you brought up this stat. The difference in possession. SKC first half, SKC only had 37% of possession. Second half, 55% of possession. What did you see that kind of led into that? Like, was it just taking your foot off the gas? What do you think happened?
I think part of it seemed like fatigue, which is disappointing to kind of even suggest, because our players shouldn't be that fatigued just second half. But I think not even necessarily like tired legs. I feel like they almost were mentally fatigued, because you could see Kansas City start to kind of change their approach in their attacks, and they were getting more opportunities. And I think maybe once we started letting them get shots off on goal, it was just exhausting to think, okay, well, they figured it out. Now we have to get stronger in the back. We have to kind of readjust how our transitioning is and how our attack is going. And I think you could kind of feel the energy just fade away a little bit. And that, I think I don't know if that's a sustenance thing, if maybe it is tired legs, or again, if it's more of a mental thing where when the other team gets going, it comes out better in this, after the locker room in the second half, you have to be able to adjust on the fly. And I feel like they weren't doing a good job of doing that.
Exactly. The fluidity of the attack seems to be was kind of a problem in this match. There was both of the goals came off of a counter or a reset after a free kick. Coach, we can kind of use this as a lead into talking tactics, but you can't really get a fluid attack going if you can't get the ball moving anywhere. And what are you seeing out there? Like, I mean, you can't rely just on counterattacks is what I'm saying in order to be successful. What are you seeing out there? Because I mentioned, I think part of it was Orellano was being asked to stay a little tighter. I love Anunga, but he's not a guy who can progress the ball as well as you hope. I mean, what are some things that you think are holding back on the fluidity of this attack?
In terms of the first half, second half differences, I think one of the things I noticed is the lack of focus at times. How many times did we see a guy let the ball go like under his foot and out of bounds? Yeah. Nick Hagglund dribbled one out over the goal line for a corner. You remember that? And then he like threw a fit, like, what? It wasn't out. And then the replay showed it was very clearly out. So I don't know if it's like what it looks like to me, and Jose said it, and I said it earlier, this ability of not wanting to take risks. I think the players play tighter when they're up a goal because they don't want to give up that goal. So instead of just playing free and continuing to just attack, they start to tighten up a little bit and say, okay, well, now we don't want to make that risky pass or try to split those lines because we're up a goal. Let's hold this lead. Let's not give it up. We've been having all these 1-goal leads. If we give this goal up, then we're going to draw. The offense isn't clicking. So I think there's a certain tightness there. In terms of the fluidity in the attack, once the FC Cincinnati get into the final third, I think that's where we have to question a little bit about what Pat Noonan wants to do with the team in terms of, I don't see any repeatable patterns of play where you really look and you see, okay, this guy's going to check to the ball and then they're going to cycle the ball this way, or if this guy's going to make a run into the channel. It really seems like once you're in the offensive third, roll the ball out and just hope good things happen when your good players get on the ball.
That brings up a point I want to make. So we're going to move into the talking tactics. Overall, again, champagne problems. We're all ecstatic FC Cincinnati won. And if you're looking at the standings, we are in first place by a whopping 1 point. So, not really a lot to complain about. It could be worse. We all know this. Unfortunately, we really know how bad it could be. But that being said, this is something that I've noticed about Pat Noonan teams is exactly what you're bringing up, Coach. They, with only a few exceptions of games, they don't seem to have that killer instinct to go out there, take risks, and just put a big number up on the scoreboard. And it's not just this year. It was the year before. It was a year before that. Ever since he's been here, I think I've noticed that with a few exceptions.
Yeah, so for talking tactics, I think the question that we talked about getting at is, does Pat Noonan have a tactical idea out there?
Yes. Is that his tactical idea, or is this just something maybe that, I don't know, the players are doing on their own? I don't know.
Yeah, so let's get into that by talking about how Sporting Kansas City set up the play. They set up in what I would call a really tight mid-block. So mid-block meaning they weren't pressed high trying to win the ball back, and they weren't sitting deep in their own half like just trying to absorb. So they're midway up the field. And when I say tight, the distance between their lines from the back line to the midfield line to the forward line was super tight. There was no space. There were often times when the center forward and the center back were 15 yards from each other with everybody else in between. Now, there are 3 ways in general to beat a tight mid-block. Number 1, you can play over the top. It's a little bit harder than when a team's pressing high because you have less space, but you play over the top in hopes that even if you don't complete those passes, the back line has to start to respect those runs in behind. And then you have a player run and that back line drops off and all of a sudden you have a little more space to play into. The second way would be to draw the defense, who's playing really tight again, to one side of the field, and then switch the ball quickly to the other side. Because if everybody's really tight and they move, that leaves a lot of space on the other side. That's where we saw so much time and space for Lucas Engel. It seems like all first half running up and down the left touchline, and SEC just kind of refused to pass it to him until, the goal. The third way would be to say, you know what, you're in a tight mid-block, but we have good enough players where we're going to tiki-taka, we're going to look like, Spain of the late 90s and we're going to early 2000s, and we're going to play through those lines anyway. So we're going to combine quickly, use the space that's there, and try to beat you. The problem with that is you have to be perfect because there is no space. FC Cincinnati didn't really try any of those. What they did is they just played in front of that back line. They would pass the ball to Anunga or Buka. That guy would one touch it back to a center back. They'd stand around for a while, and then one of the center backs would try a long ball or something. Evander started dropping way deep to get touches, and it seems like the only time they were able to progress the ball effectively is either Luca Orshano dropping in, getting on the ball, and creating space for himself by dribbling, or by turning the ball over and then winning the ball back. So the question is this on Pat Noonan? Well, Pat Noonan tried some things in the game to change things. It looked to me like in the second half, Luca Orshano was dropping way deep in the first half. In the second half, I thought he pushed Luca Orshano up alongside Kevin Denkey to give Evander more space. And I think that's the idea. Put more guys up top, try to expand those lines. But the team just was not moving the ball quickly enough. So they would try to move the ball to switch it, but it was all so slow and ponderous. And you heard Pat Noonan talk about that in his post-game presser. And then they tried a few long balls, but they weren't successful. And then they just abandoned it. Now, how much can a coach, but besides saying, come on, guys, we got to move the ball quicker. We got to move the ball quicker. Try that ball into the channel. Other than saying that, you don't have a lot of control as a coach. And here's the thing. When did SC Cincinnati start moving the ball and playing a lot better? It's when the substitutions came on. Obi and Santos came on for Miazga and Anunga. Orshano shifted to right wing back and Yedlin to right center back. The tactics were the same, but Obi was willing to actually turn and play forward where Anunga absolutely was not. So no longer SKC couldn't just sit on Buka and be like, that's fine, pass the ball to Anunga. He's just going to pass it back to Matt Miazga. They couldn't do that anymore. And then also Orshano, I don't think he played better as a right wing back, but he was much better than DeAndre Yedlin at moving that ball forward once he shifted out there. So my conclusion is I don't know whether Pat Noonan has a really big, good tactical approach or not. You can't really tell. It seems to me he's trying things, but when the players are out there and they're the ones confronted with this problem and they have all played long enough, Matt Miazga knows when you face a mid block how to beat that. He's a smart guy. So the players have to start to show some leadership and start to move the ball quicker and start to take some risks out there, dribbling in between the lines or passing the ball into Kevin Denkey's feet and things like that.
All of that great stuff, Coach. One of the things I do wonder, do we still have a little bit of a hangover from, and anybody can take this, from Lucho being here? Because in the past, having a playmaker like Lucho can bail you out of a lot of problems. You need to get around people, get the ball to Lucho. Do we think that maybe there's still a little bit of that hangover of not having a guy who's as good on the ball as Lucho?
We talked about this also at the beginning of the season, and I think we saw the team still. I don't know if it was a hangover or the tactics had to change because you didn't have Magic Man there doing his stuff. But I think we're starting to see the play spread out more and more with each passing game. Now, it's not perfect. There's still hesitation in the final third. But I think as time goes on, and again, I'm sounding like a broken record here. As time goes on, I think the players will get more and more comfortable not having Magic Man there to solve problems. Now, we are at the end of April. I did say at some point, if we're having this discussion at the end of April, we may be having a problem. Well, I don't think it's that big of a problem, but we better solve the final third here real quick as we start getting into some tough games.
Yeah, exactly. One thing though that I do think is something about this team that we can all kind of hang our hats on for the most part is, and this gets back to that discussion about being afraid to be a little bit more aggressive with the ball because you don't want to give up that one goal. Our defense is pretty stacked this year. And we've got guys who are on the bench or not playing right now who could easily slot in for any starting center back for any team in this league. Christy, I bring this up because we've had the discussion about aggressiveness, but from the back line especially, I mean, don't you think that maybe they should just kind of be trusting them a little bit more?
Yeah, and I think I was really about to just bring that up too. I think if we're theorizing that, let's say it is a tactic from Noonan to kind of minimize that risk taking, I think that's more of an indictment on not trusting the reaction of finishing those chances. So like, let's say more so than, oh, well, they're not going to finish the chances if they take risks. I think they don't trust that, okay, they don't finish the chance, but then the other team gets the ball and they're not trusting our reaction to prevent that extra goal from the other team. So I think it's less so, oh, well, we're not going to score a goal. It's more so, okay, if we don't score that goal, is the other team going to grab the ball, immediately turn around and then score on us? And that doesn't make sense to me because again, our backline is strong. Our backline does have good reaction to those sorts of scenarios. So I find it very odd that there would be, if it is the case that they would be minimizing that risk taking, when I don't foresee that being a big issue.
Right. And I agree with that. That is something I've noticed too. But this has kind of been a problem I've had with FC Cincinnati for years now, is they don't seem to want to be aggressive in the final third. In this, not just this year, we've seen that year after year. I can't think of, since Brenner and Brandon Vasquez were here, we have not had aggressive risk takers in the box, and even they weren't like super aggressive. That being said, with the big three that we have up front, do we think this is the proverbial gelling thing, that these are guys that just need to get their stuff figured out? We mentioned Evander didn't look too happy in this match. Now, a lot of that could have just been him, being a little frustrated with his own self. Yeah. But, is that just, do we think that's that proverbial gelling that everybody is kind of getting tired of hearing about?
I think that's some of it, but also like when you have an offense and you just, let's take the three center backs out of it. They're not really part of the offense. They're out there, but they're not pushing far forward. So when you talk about the other 7 guys, you have 7 guys against probably 8 or 9 outfield players of the other team. You can't afford to have one of your 7 or 2 of your 7 that are just a complete non-factor. And when you have DeAndre Yedlin, who is really only good out there in the offense to get a touch and pass it back to Miles Robinson, or I guess in this case, it was Miles until he shifted to the center, and then it was, then he was the center back. But that's all he does is puts his foot on the ball and then passes it back to a center back. And then you have Brian Anunga, who again, really good player in a lot of ways, but he is an offensive non-ad. So he is out there maybe to help you shift the ball from the right to the left, and doesn't even do that particularly quickly or well. So now you only have 5 guys, they're out there to attack against the 8 or 9 of the other team, right? And you start to see how certainly when 3 of those guys are Orishano, Evander, and Kevin Denkey, you still have a puncher's chance, but not unless they are clicking perfectly. So they're starting to gel. There were definitely some moments, Orishano had a moment where he was dribbling and he should have played the ball to Lucas Engel wide open on the left, and he tried to fit it into Evander. And like a little bit, I'm like, I don't mind that much, because it shows like I trust Evander. I'm going to try to force that ball into him. Was the wrong decision. I would have rather made the other one, but you start to see things like that. But just so I don't continue to keep rambling here, I guess my biggest takeaway is you can either change the people or change the tactics. But the play, let's get into the final third and just move the ball around and look for openings. When 2 of your players out there aren't going to do anything dangerous with the ball, it just starts to become really tough to create chances.
Another thing that really interests me is when in the past, like this season and last season, when we see some of our young players come off the bench, in the 75th minute, in the 86th minute, like when we see Dado come off the bench, when we would see Brett Halsey come off the bench, I think you see a lot more of that in the final third, where they're willing to kind of try out dribbling around the defender and not just passing it back to ours, and trying out different styles of play and things like that. And so I know that it's possible, and I understand that that's when they come in at the 90th minute and we're up a goal or 2, that's a great time to try it out. But why are we not utilizing that more? And I'm not saying just young players, and I know we don't have Halsey anymore, but why aren't our people who are on the field for 90 minutes utilizing that more, using those opportunities to try new things in the game? I would like to see more creativity, I think.
Yeah. And that's where I would criticize Pat Noonan. I talked about Pat Noonan feels like more of the player's issue when I was talking about progressing the ball through the thirds. But in the attacking third, I mentioned I don't see any repeatable patterns of play. And, if Pat Noonan says, whenever DeAndre Yedlin gets a touch, I need one player, it can be Orishano, it can be Kevin Denkey, one of you make a hard run to the corner so he has an option to pass the ball in. If you don't get the ball after you run outside, cycle back wide and give him an option out there. After this guy runs, somebody else fold filled in behind him into the space that he left. Even just that gives you those two options. And then Kevin Denkey, or if Denkey makes that run, one of you fill in the middle in case there's a cross. Now you have three options, but it's repeatable patterns where when this happens, you're going to do this. And it's not trying to dictate everything a player does, because you leave it up to them to decide who's going to make the run and what option you're going to choose. But that guy on the ball knows he has options. Right now, all I see is once you get into the final third, move the ball around, see if you can get it to Evander or to Kevin Denkey and go from there.
Rupesh asks, and I'm going to put in a little asterisk on this too, or my own thoughts on this question. How much of an improvement offensively do we think Obi would be over Anunga? I'm going to add to that. Would we rather play someone else besides Obi if the problem is advancing the ball? Because as good as Obi is, he's still not a world beater. I don't think he's our best passer passing forward either. So this can go out to the group, but do we think Obi will be an improvement, or just since we're spitballing here, would maybe once he comes back playing a Kubo there, or maybe putting Baird there as a extra midfielder to try to advance the ball? Is there an option maybe with another player to kind of move things out a little bit more effectively?
Well, I think Obi is better than Anunga, but yes, he's not somebody who's going to create a lot of plays up front. When you mentioned Kubo, I think Kubo is a good guy coming off the bench. I've never seen him. I mean, he's done good as a starter, but I've seen the team improve. I'm not going to say significantly, but improve in terms of energy, in terms of moving forward when he comes in as a substitution. So I don't know if you bring him in when, the game seems on the line and you need to create more opportunities, you bring him in the midfield, and then you start creating more of these opportunities. I just don't think we have right now, other than maybe Evander, someone who can really create a lot of opportunities with progressive passes in the midfield. Buka's one. And Buka's getting better and better. I mean, every game that goes by, I see him getting better and better. And maybe that's an option. And then maybe a Buka and a Kubo, maybe in the second half or when things are on the line, you bring him in with 20, 30 minutes left to start creating more opportunities. And that's just one thought I have.
Yeah. Well, let's put a pin in talking tactics as we move forward. Folks, great discussion. Always a pleasure to talk tactics with Coach. He always brings some good thoughts to the discussion. Folks, let's give a big shout out to Beyond Exercise, one of our sponsors. Beyond Exercise is a local physical therapy and fitness business that helps people stay active and injury-free. In fact, they've helped some of our local MLS Next, and FCC Academy players with their health and performance needs. Check out their suite of services at gobeyondexercise.com. After the day I had doing a bunch of yard work, I think I might need to go in there for some physical therapy myself. Not as in good a shape as I used to be, obviously.
I got some honeysuckle here that needs some rooting out.
No, thank you. I reseeded, put down straw, I mowed, bagged. I got a good workout in today. So FC Cincinnati is coming off of an undefeated April. I don't think any of us, besides maybe Cliff, thought that was going to happen. Beggars can't be choosers. We love it. FC Cincinnati currently sitting atop the Eastern Conference standings with 22 points, just one ahead of Columbus and 3 points ahead of Philadelphia and Charlotte. They are exactly 1 point behind Vancouver for the Supporter Shield. That's a surprising team that I don't think anybody expected to have such a season. Before we get into talking about FC Cincinnati in May, did any of you watch that Vancouver versus Inter Miami CONCACAF Champions League game? I'm so happy for Vancouver. If you haven't followed the saga in the offseason, it was announced that the ownership group is looking to sell the Whitecaps. They said they want to find a local ownership group. We all know how that goes sometimes in professional sports in the United States. Mm-hmm. I hope they stay in Vancouver.
Yeah.
There's also an MLS group in Indianapolis. All I'm saying. But that being said, I'm really happy for the Whitecaps in front of 55,000 people advancing in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. and bucking the trend by being a good MLS team in the league. That's not something you see very often from these teams that are doing well in the cup competitions. All right. This month, we got a bunch of big games, some big ones in the Eastern Conference and some out of conference games as well. So, NYCFC, Austin, Toronto, Hellas Real versus Columbus, Atlanta, Dallas, and DC, all in the month of May. And of course, several of these are on the road. NYCFC, Toronto, Columbus, and Atlanta, all away from TQL Stadium. Christy, other than Hellas Real, because you can't, that's the easy answer. Which one of these matches kind of intrigues you the most coming up in May?
I think Austin. I think Austin will be really interesting. I think they're playing really well. I think they're playing really in a really interesting style of play. So I'll be interested to see how we respond in that matter. And I think always just playing someone from the Western Conference who's high up in their standings as well is always a good kind of test to see more so where we're at than just the teams that we're used to playing every single year. So I think that that'll be a really telling experience to kind of see where we're at outside of our own comfort zone.
You bring up Austin. We've also got Dallas in the month of May. So 2 former FC Cincinnati players, Brandon Vasquez for Austin, and of course Lucho Acosta making his return to TQL Stadium. Jose, ask you this: do you boo either of them?
Yes. Especially Lucho. Hey, look, I'm orange and blue now, right? So I'm going to boo anything that's not wearing orange and blue. I mean, respect for both players. You know, Vasquez did a lot for this team. Lucha, of course, we know we don't need to say all the things he did for us. Great players. I mean, I would say especially Lucha because of the way he did it more than anything. I think he did not respect the fan base that we gave him everything, you know, our soul, our cheers, our support. So I think it was just more that it's for me personally. This is just a personal thing. It was a lack of respect more than anything. So yes, I will boo. I will boo Lucha more than I will Vasquez.
I will say when we played Monterrey in the Champions Cup last year and Vasquez scored, I may have let out a little boo. Just a little one. I was like, I'm not going to boo him. And then he scored on us. Come on, man. Obviously, Hell is Real coming up in May. That's going to be big in terms of Supporter Shield and Eastern Conference standings. Coach, as we head into the month of May, how many points do you think we're going to get?
Yeah, we were talking about this off air before the show started, and I think Jose predicted 12. Christy and I both settled on 11. We got there from different angles. But let me just tell you, I think some deceptively tricky fixtures. You know, Toronto away. Toronto's been really good defensively, especially at home. And I feel like we all root for a team who we've all been saying has not been great offensively yet. So I don't know if that has 0-0 draw written all over it, or, you know, you give up a goal because you're playing on the road. You know, I think away at Atlanta, that's always a tricky fixture. I don't care how bad Atlanta's being. They're a team who might lose 4 or 5 in a row at home, and you're still going to go into Atlanta and be like, yeah, but if, right, latte lot, and these guys, Almiron, if they get going. So I think that's a deceptively tricky fixture too. I think we probably, FC Cincinnati loses 2 out of those 4 home games, which leads me to 11 points. You know, throw a draw or 2 in there.
I'll go with 10. I think we do come
Pessimist.
back. I'm gonna be a little pessimistic. Set the bar low, so when you get over it, you know it's even better. I think that this month is going to be very telling in terms of what sort of team that we actually have. You mentioned the road game in Atlanta, always tough out there. I think the road game up at Columbus. I mean, I'm not a fan, but they do play a very, and I think this is why I brought up the whole, like, what is Pat Noonan's tactics? They play a very pretty version of soccer.
Yeah.
And they do it without breaking the bank. And I think everybody in MLS kind of wants that to happen. And it's going to be a tough out up at Columbus. I think we're more talented than we were last year when we played there, but I think they're also going to be motivated. to win that one. So I'll say 10 points in May. I hope I'm wrong. Folks, that about wraps it up here for us tonight. If you would like to support Cincinnati Soccer Talk in making content like this, it is past my bedtime. Go on over to cincinnatiSoccerTalk.com/support. From there, you'll be able to sign up for our Patreon page and make a one-time donation. A paid Patreon subscription enters you into the Growler Cup competition as well, which is another great bonus for all of our patrons. Folks, it's time for our final thoughts. Christy, once again, thank you for taking time out of your evening to be with us tonight. What is your final thought for the evening?
Yeah, I think the theme, again, champagne problems. I like what I'm seeing. I think there's always room for improvement. I especially think I'm pushing for that coming up for Hell is Real. I think that game always really gets us off balance. And on top of all the other challenging games we have in May, I would really like to see us push really hard and take away a win at Columbus. It's difficult. They're a great team. They're great in their own house. We are not as great on the road, especially in Columbus. And so I think even though we're doing well, we're winning games, I want to see us push a little bit harder and gear up for something like that and finally win at their house and not have it be agonizing to watch.
Had to put that comment up about the Haslams and the Browns. Thank you, Christy. So before we went on the air tonight, Coach was like, I'm going to go after Jose. So, Jose.
Do this.
Set Coach up here.
Okay. So, I will always take the 3 points. Again, I said this at the beginning. I don't care how ugly the win is. Of course, I will have something to say if it's an ugly win, but 3 points is 3 points, and I will take it. I think we're starting to see some of that gelling that we've talked about, some of that communication, some of that chemistry. It's coming along. Not as fast as we like it because of all the reasons we know, the injuries and all that. I am concerned, as I said also during the show, it is the end of April, and we're still going to see the gelling that we like to see, especially in that final third. And while one goal wins, a win is a win, I personally don't think that one goal wins are sustainable in the long run. And I'm going to say the reason real quick. Last year, we had the same situation. We were winning by 1 goal, and then, we start sliding down. We still made the playoffs, wound up in 3rd place. I mean, despite all that, the team came through. But we saw that those 1 goal wins were not sustainable. Now, granted, our back line wasn't as strong as it is this year, so that might change it, but I'm still holding on to that.
Thank you, Jose. Coach, your rebuttal.
I just wanted to go after Jose because of that, focusing on that comment that 1 goal wins are not sustainable, because I am not worried about this team because the way to build a foundation for a really great successful season in MLS is to go out and be great defensively. And this team has had a couple of off matches, but like if you take out the Philadelphia game, their non-penalty XG allowed is really good. And their defense, our defense is giving up basically nothing to a lot of the opponents. Sporting Kansas City had like 0.5 non-penalty XG, which is really good for a team to allow those few chances. So I do think 1 goal wins are sustainable throughout the season to have a really great, solid season. Now, here's where I totally agree with Jose. Once you get to the playoffs, you have to be able to put up goals, because 1 goal wins sometimes turn into 0-0 draws, which turn into penalty kick shootouts. And as we saw against NYCFC last year, those can go your way and those can't. It's kind of a crapshoot at that point. So as long as this team improves, which they still have a long time to do, I'm not an end of April start to hit the panic button or even end of May. Once the playoffs are here, if FC Cincinnati is still not scoring more than 1 goal a match, 2 goals every once in a while, then I'll start to worry a bit. Until then, keep playing great defense. I think that's only going to get better. We still have a Hadeb to get back. We still have Kubo to get back. Obi, who is a fantastic defensive player, has been out for 3 or 4 matches. So I think those things are sustainable, and I'm pretty happy with how this team is going, with that caveat that I don't think they can win a trophy unless they start to play better offensively, but they got time.
it's a marathon, not a sprint, and it's hard to believe just how much season is still left to play.
Lots. There's still lots left.
Yeah. And we still got a whole other summer transfer window. So who knows, what that's going to bring. My final thought, originally I was going to rant about Liverpool winning the EPL and how boring it is in Europe because all the same teams win all the time. And then I thought that would just be me coming off as a bitter Tottenham Hotspur fan because if you want to know what a salary cap would look like in the EPL, Tottenham is a team with a salary cap that doesn't need. Anyway, I digress. Really, I do want to point out that there is another big rivalry matchup coming up this week on May 1st. I will be in attendance. It is the Commonwealth Cup between Lexington SC and our old friends, our Dirty River Derby cohorts, Louisville City. They're playing their inaugural one in USL Championship at Louisville on Thursday. My brother was cool and got myself and my nephew tickets, so I'll be down there. Really looking forward to checking out that stadium. And I bring that up because I know we have this feature on CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com called Soccer in Our Area that talks about all these other teams and all this other stuff. And so it's going to be real nice to check out some soccer in our area. I'm going to be a neutral. Honestly, don't care who wins, and it's going to be a lot of fun just to check out the stadium. So anyway, there's your podcast for the evening. Sorry about the technical difficulties starting off. We'll figure it out next time I host. I promise. For Jose, Christy, and Coach, I'm Jason Ashcraft. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next week, this has been Cincinnati Soccer Talk.